everybody from outside the Fargo Dome. It is homecoming day for Northern Iowa and North Dakota State here on the Bison pregame show. We are live along with Eric Peterson and Jeff Kolpak. I'm Dom Izzo as we get set for what should be a humdinger of a football game here in a couple hours between Northern Iowa and NDSU. We're glad you're joining us live on the Bison Media blog, WDAY.com and Inforum.com. Jeffrey, all I have to say is the letters and that gets everybody a little extra juice today.
It gets a little blood pressure flowing here, doesn't it?
Yes.
And we coined the term, you coined the term, Northern Iowa Loud, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah.
You know, trademark's kind of big in the state of North Dakota these days, that story. I think you need to trademark that.
I might have to. We figure it's going to be loud. Big E, these two teams have played some instant classics. We're going to talk about it over the next 30 minutes. Today will fall in that line as well. For Northern Iowa, I don't know if it's a must-win, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, if they lose and get 3 losses, you almost have to run the table. If 4 losses, you're on the bubble. Otherwise, they have to run the table to make the playoffs. And Northern Iowa's been the one team who's given the Bison problems, especially over the last 2 years. Even the year NDSU went undefeated, arguably one of the best teams they've ever had. They're down 13 at home going into the 4th quarter against Northern Iowa. And to that point of the game, the Panthers have outplayed the Bison. So this is a team that can match NDSU physical-wise, and they're a team that's been able to do it over the long haul. So it should be an interesting game.
I want to talk about Northern Iowa's season, Jeff, because you and I we've spoken about it on the radio show and on the pregame show, how difficult their schedule has been to this point. Road game to start the year at Iowa State, road game at Cal Poly, road game at Illinois State, and now today, throwing that their only home game was Eastern Washington, top 10 team.
Well, here's the question I have is, do they have enough in the tank? Because when you go on the road that much to start the season, at some point, your Thursday's gone, right? You got to do all this classwork. I mean, these kids do go to class, I assume. So you have to do all the makeup homework. You got to make all those arrangements. Then Friday, you got to hit the road. And then Saturday comes along. I mean, that takes a lot of energy. And to do that this many weeks in a row, we'll see.
You pointed out, and Big E, you'll remember this last year, Sam Houston State came here on its 3rd consecutive road game during the FCS playoffs. And it was a short week as well. They played on a Friday, but they were out of gas at the end of that stretch.
Well, granted, this is earlier in the season, and playoff football is a little bit different intensity, but there's still something to that. I mean, it's hard to get in a routine. You're always in your road routine. Like Jeff said, you're worried about getting your chem test made up or your chem homework or whatever classes you're in. So it just adds another element of worry when it's 4 out of 5 weeks. And I think if you're Northern Iowa and you can get through this stretch, if they can, get a win today and be 3-2, they'd have to be feeling pretty good with the way the rest of their schedule lines up.
Exactly right, Big E, because the rest of their schedule, Jeff, they still have a road trip to Brookings, but they get Indiana State at home. 4 of their last 6 games are at home. You figure if they can steal one here today, boy, it sets up really well for them for the rest of 2015.
But I mean, you could say that with a lot of teams this time in the schedule.
But not many this many teams have home games like Northern Iowa does on the back end. That's the only point there.
Yeah, so they have to get through this part of the schedule, right? And if they lose today, they're 2-3. But if you run the schedule from there are 24 teams in the FCS playoffs. The Valley is by far the #1 in the GPI as far as strength of schedule. Whether the committee takes that into account is another story.
They don't.
They don't.
They don't.
But you got to figure, by your count now.
I had 6 in my first bracketology. I think that's
too many.
That'll probably get down to 5 as the season goes along. But right now, they've shown everything to be the best team, the best league going.
Well, if UNI, has to go to where they get 4 losses. We've seen teams with 4 losses make it. And he wasn't even there with some 5-loss teams.
Indiana State did last year.
With that schedule, if they have 4 losses, I still think they're going to be in the mix just because they've played such a bear of a schedule, so many road games, so many highly ranked teams, an FBS team, so they'll have a chance. But you don't want to go to 3 losses this early. Your margin for error goes way down if you lose a game like this early in the season.
Well, I'd like to say that Big E was the biggest act in town. Normal on Saturdays he is, but ESPN was here earlier today for Sports Center on the road. The doors open at 4:45 a.m. I can validate it because I was here when they opened. The crowd, it wasn't game day. You guys both watched it on TV. I know it looked pretty good on television. It was not to the extent of the crowd that we've seen at downtown, but they were loud. There was a big crowd there. I think what ESPN tried to accomplish was showing off the home field advantage that North Dakota State has, and I think it came across for everybody. Chris Kleiman was up on set. All in all, Jeff, this is a massive recruiting tool.
Do you think ESPN and North Dakota State is like a bromance of sorts?
It is.
That's the way I've termed it. I think it started in 2007 when the Bison went down to the University of Minnesota. Tyler Roll gets a school record, 263 yards. That game, Tyler Roll's highlights was on the ESPN play all weekend. And I think that started it. You have those FBS wins, certainly the title, but by and large, College Game Day coming here and the success it had, I think just put it on the map for the network.
I think the first College Game Day, ESPN took a bit of a risk. I mean, sure, everyone nationally and even probably locally, what are you doing coming to an FCS program? And it was downtown, and people were like, why is it downtown? Why is it not on campus? And, they hit a home run, I feel, in their eyes with that first scene. And I think that's what really put them on the map as far as ESPN is concerned.
Well, now for those early people that were complaining, Kolpak, they've had it both at the Dome and downtown. I'm not quite sure where else they want to go, like on top of Menard Hall or something.
And you were there. Try picture game day inside the Dome.
It wouldn't have worked.
It wouldn't have worked.
No, but I have to take the downtown image out of my mind, which is really hard, but I still don't think it would have been as cool.
And some people wanted it outside in front of the Dome, but what is the Fargo Dome? It's a big brick building.
These ESPN people, they know it looks good on TV. I mean, downtown Fargo looks like a movie set. Like it was set up specifically for that show to run there. You have tight quarters. You have the Fargo marquee in the back. You have all the condos and stuff. You have people hanging from balconies. You get an effect that I haven't seen in many other game day spots. You can drop a championship banner that's 110 feet tall from a roof. They're bringing people in fire trucks. They've got track. I mean, they just got unique things you can do in a downtown setting that you would not be able to do on campus. Better visuals. It worked out, and ESPN made the right decision.
Before we take our first break, a look at the other conference games today, Jeffrey. South Dakota playing at Western Illinois. Boy, the Leathernecks have a great shot to get to 2-0 in league play. And then a bunch of night games tonight, which will be fun to watch. Illinois State at Youngstown State is the other heavyweight matchup today. That's 4 versus 7 in the country.
And I have Youngstown State in this game because I think they're the most improved team in the league defensively. I think defense wins this game. Trey Roberson is a game-time decision.
We don't know what his status is. Indiana State at South Dakota State, Big E. And after we saw the Jacks last week, I know we're not ready to go there with a must-win for Northern Iowa. Is it a must-win for SDSU? Another one at home?
I don't know if it's a must-win, but I think it's a confidence win. I think they need to bounce back. They got handled pretty bad last week. You don't want to lose 2 games in a row at home because then that pushes you to have to win a road game later in the season that has bigger implications. You have to win at home because it's tough doing on the road, and I think that's a big game just from that aspect.
I know we both picked the Jacks, but watch Indiana State today. If they win in Brookings, they're for real in this league too, I believe.
I think their quarterback is for real. They put 56 up on Missouri State, and they did it with ease, too.
Yes, Mo State on the road at SIU. We really can't stress enough how big that game is for Dale Lennon in Southern Illinois tonight.
Southern Illinois, by far, snake bit team, I think, in the history of FCS. They have 3 losses by 5 points.
We'll take a break. When we come back, the recent history between these two teams. It all started with a punch. That's next on the Bison pregame show, live from the Fargo Dome, here on WDAY.com. Welcome back, everybody. Just outside the Fargo Dome, the Bison pregame show rolls on, along with Big E and Jeff Kolpak. I'm Tom Izzo. Should be a fantastic setting today. Northern Iowa and North Dakota State playing for the 8th time as members of Division I for NDSU. Northern Iowa, though, Jeffrey, holds an advantage in this series, 4-3. We can go back to the first time they played when you were there at the Unidome in 2008. It really took a different meaning that year because the Bison were coming off back-to-back 10-1 seasons, and then in the preseason poll, the one you voted in, NDSU was voted #1 in the league.
For some reason, the folks in Northern Iowa didn't appreciate that vote, and they let everybody know that in that day in 2008. I thought that was the game, Dom, that really changed NDSU's fortunes, and I say that for this reason. Craig Bohl looked at UNI and said, you know what? We need to get better physically, and he looked right at UNI and said, who are they recruiting? We need to recruit those guys.
And that's why this series momentum is shifted, which I want to talk about in a second. But 2009 is when things really got testy. Obviously, that was a difficult year for North Dakota State. Ryan, you can go ahead and play that video when you get a second, but that's the punch incident when Pat Paschal was taken out on the sideline hard right in front of the Bison bench. It got nasty, and after that, things had never been the same.
Right, and that was one of those post-game press conferences where you ask, okay, what went on here? And you really found out, I thought, that week that, boy, that game, the more you heard about it, the more jabs back and forth you heard about it, and that hasn't stopped. I mean, you talk about the 2009 game when UNI, you think they were ready to play?
Holy cow.
I mean, NDSU comes off that win over Kansas. UNI goes in there and just blows them up.
The 10 sacks game there in 2010. Then Big E, 2011, it was 2 versus 3 in the country here at the Fargo Dome, and that's when the crowd changed in that game.
The crowd changed. If you want to look at maybe a signature play that got NDSU on the path it is right now, Kyle Emanuel and Travis Beck, the cause fumble and touchdown. And those two became stalwarts in that whole run. I mean, if you want to like look at one moment, that could be it. And that, like you said, the crowds are good before, but
not loud.
That's when it became like you had to get the like noise monitors and compared to like planes taking off and jet engines and all that stuff. So that kind of almost flipped the attitude of the NDSU fan base as well, I think.
Also in that game, it's important to note that the NDSU president, Dean Brashani, gave Kevin Schnepp a gold Bison coin because he was the only one to pick the Bison in the newspaper that day. You and I both had Northern Iowa.
Well, I thought an objective journalist should not accept the gold coin.
Yeah, right?
I would have denied it. I would have said, no, I can't play favorites.
Now, 2012, that was a unbelievable. That was when Brock Jensen was coming at a different level. I think he only threw 5 incomplete passes in that day. John Crockett had a monster day on the ground. The Bison offense was unstoppable that day.
I thought that's when really Brock Jensen, when you knew big games were big games, when he came to play. I mean, there was games that Indiana State, for instance, when he threw 2 picks, probably wasn't up as much as he should.
Not his level, no.
No, big games were Brock's games.
2013, you mentioned it off the top. That was the game that I think every Bison fan sweated the most in 2013 because that was the closest they came to losing that ridiculous team that was filled with NFL players on it. The Bison were down 23-10 in the 4th quarter. David Johnson got hurt. Jake Farley, the star linebacker for Northern Iowa, broke his leg. And yet the Bison went for it on 4th down. Brock Jensen threw a touchdown pass to Zach Vra, and after that, the Bison came back and won the football game.
Yeah, I mean, 2 times that season we thought NDSU may lose. At Kansas State, which is expected, but at home, the way that team was rolling against Northern Iowa, and I just think shows you this is a rivalry game.
Yes.
Like, Northern Iowa could come in 1-4, or vice versa with NDSU, and this is going to be a close game. They're physical teams. It's just the type of matchup where the game's going to be close.
Are we going to see the belt?
Maybe.
Let's go back to last year because that's when Northern Iowa got back on its winning track, and it was, to use Big E's term, that was a boat race last year. They dominated the football game, Northern Iowa.
Well, that was a game, though. Carson Wentz, you remember, came in hurt. The run game was totally taken away. Northern Iowa knew it. You can talk about David Johnson all you want. I think the biggest factor for Northern Iowa this year from last year is Xavier Williams, the nose guard. You asked Tim Polsek, who was a great player in the league last year. I know a lot of linebackers got a lot of notoriety.
Yep.
I thought Xavier Williams was a beast.
And I agree with Kolpak. I think that game last year was won by their defense. NDSU was driving. Kilfoy has the big interception, returns it. It was a 10-3 game going into the 4th quarter, so it wasn't like NDSU's defense was giving up chunks of yards all over the place. That was the defensive game. The Panthers' defense shut down the NDSU run game. They caused a big turnover inside the 10-yard line. And to me, those were the key factors in Northern Iowa winning that game.
Should be a fantastic environment. When we come back after the break, we'll talk about the Bison defense, how it's turned the corner since the Montana game, and also Northern Iowa will play more than one quarterback today. We'll get into this game coming up next on the Bison pregame show live on Inforum.com, WDAY.com, and the Bison Media blog. Welcome back, everybody, live outside the Fargo Dome, where the Fargo Beer Club is hosting us, I believe for the 3rd or 4th time. I can't remember how many times they've hosted us here.
At least. Yeah. But is it mid-October?
And it doesn't feel like it.
It feels like, what,
mid-80s
outside?
I know it. You might have to lose.
Is it my jacket?
Where are the jorts? You got your jorts?
I kind of like saving the jorts for August. You get into September, October, it's time to put those things away.
Well, back in August, we were wondering about the Bison defense and what was going to happen. And then the Montana game happened, and a lot of Bison fans were like, oh, boy.
Oh, no.
But the last 3 weeks NDSU's defense has come back, Jeff, and E had the great stat that everybody's picked up and run with it. -9 rushing yards over the last 8 quarters. What has happened?
You should trademark that stat, by the way.
-8 over the last 9 quarters. Okay. Get it right now.
Yeah, trademark it. What has happened? I think Nate Tangaway is developing into an All-American player right before our very eyes. I think he is almost the Xavier Williams of Northern Iowa this year. He's only a sophomore, too. I mean, I think he's just really coming on. I think the DNs are growing up a little bit. They're getting more players in now, too. And the Montana game, by the way, 92 snaps. That defense, that D-line was not built for 92 snaps.
We mentioned in the post-game show last week, Greg Menard is growing up in front of him. I mean, he was unguardable last week.
Well, it starts with the defensive front, then you have Nick DeLuca behind that, and then I don't want to discount what, I just think C.J. Smith stabilized the secondary where, all right, you'll put him on their best wide receiver, and then you don't have to worry about him. And then that helped the young safeties, that helped the back end, and then the front 7 could just worry about stopping the run, and that's what they've done these last 3 games.
I think also, Jeff, maybe a little bit overlooked is what Nick DeLuca has done. He is playing at this level. He was already good. He's at another level right now.
Do you think Joe Glenn wants Nick DeLuca in the mix? He thought
a lot of guys do.
6'3", 244. That's NFL size.
Also, MJ Stump has played really well at that other linebacker.
Well, just overall, you lose Carlton Littlejohn. You lose Travis Beck. Even Esley Thornton played pretty well there. And you're like, what's going to happen? Just to look back. MJ Stump's made big plays. Pierre G. Tucker maybe hasn't made the splash plays, but you don't notice them. If you're not getting noticed, that's good because you're not breaking coverages. You're not leaving huge gaps in the run game.
All right. Now, the Bison defense has had to prepare, Jeff, for 2 quarterbacks, though, this week, as UNI employs both Sawyer Colmorgan, who they're familiar with, now as a senior. It's hard to believe he's now in his 4th year starting, but also Aaron Bailey, the transfer from Illinois, who can use his legs. He did it against Eastern Washington. Who do you think starts today?
Well, who would I start?
Who would you start?
I would start Sawyer Colmorgan because he has been here before. He's seen the noise.
Yeah.
Aaron Bailey's a transfer. Granted, he's from a Big Ten school, but there's something different about going inside to this place that I think from an outdoor stadium perspective is just different. I don't care how big it is, whether it's Indiana or Michigan or whatever. It's just different in here. I would go with Colmorgan. He's a senior. Granted, he's only throwing 51% of his, completing 51% of his passes, and Bailey's not much better at 52%. But, Bailey's got that run, pass, dual threat.
Right.
I don't think they can run against NDSU today. I go with Colmorgan in his right arm.
What do you think? Who would you start?
I go Aaron Bailey. I don't think Colmorgan's thrown the ball well enough to warrant him starting over Bailey. I think Bailey gives you that running. You have to have as many threats in the run game against this NDSU defense the way it's playing right now. I don't think Colmorgan's a threat keeping the ball in the run game. Aaron Bailey is. Therefore, that gives the Bison front 7 something else to think about. I would go with Aaron Bailey.
I'm curious. I'm going to go with Colmorgan. I never disagree with you, but I think Colmorgan is the guy today.
You just decided right now, didn't you?
I was still flip-flopping a little bit, but I think just because of what you said about the environment inside, Colmorgan played it, and he played well in that game in 2013.
Well, I think we're going to see both, but I just think Colmorgan just makes you so one-dimensional in the run game. One-dimensional in one part of the game. I just think Bailey gives you that threat. We saw it with Jarek McKinnon. Not to say Aaron Bailey's anywhere near the athlete Jarek McKinnon is, but running quarterbacks have given the Bison. Trey Roberson. Yeah. If you have that threat of the running quarterback, that can give this defense some problems.
I will say this, Kolpak. Let's go back to 2010. Remember Northern Iowa? That was the season debut for them, and NDSU prepared for a totally different quarterback. Terrell Rennie came out, and he blitzed NDSU. They had no stopping him that day.
Oh, and they also went out in a 3-4, too.
They did that, too. They were all 3-4.
Yeah, that started the 3-4 anxiety, didn't it? UNI is a 4-3 team all these years, and for that one game, they came out with some 3-4 looks. Again, do you think UNI is looking at NDSU in the offseason? Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, we take a break. We come back. We'll update you on the injuries that are going on. The Bison have a couple, especially on the offense, that we'll tell you about. And don't forget, our Saturday selections. Everybody's waiting around. They want to know what Big E's going to bring out. That's next. We come back on the Bison pregame show.
Specialists are so important because they're the ones that can take your team from average to great. The guys that have their specialized roles and understand them and do them really well, those guys are hard to find. And so when you have those guys that are good at what they do and believe in what they're doing, don't care too much about who gets the credit, and want to go out and prove something, I think that is probably the most important ingredient in a successful team.
Choose the experts. Choose Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
The Media Blog Injury Report, brought to you by Sanford Orthopedics.
Time for our Sanford Health Injury Update. Kolpak, let's first start with running back Chase Morlock. His status for today.
Well, he was 80% last week. Now, what does that mean? I don't think he could cut as strong as he maybe could normally. Probably 90%. He's playing today for sure.
The other guy to watch out is wide receiver Darius Shepard. Suffered an AC shoulder joint injury. Chris Kleiman told me yesterday he's going to play. We're not quite sure how effective he can be. He's been tremendous the first 4 games.
He's a tough kid, though. I think he's like Travis Beck on the offense. You know, I think he can play with pain.
We don't know about the status of left guard Zach Johnson. Will he play today after breaking his foot?
All indications are he's going to be in the lineup.
What do you think of that?
Well, not many plays, maybe 10 plays, but he's an all-conference guy, Dom. I think that's a pretty big deal.
All right, Big E, they've all gathered around. They're ready for the Saturday selections. We take a break. We'll have predictions for the Missouri Valley and NDSU in Northern Iowa. That's when we wrap up the pregame show. Next, live outside the Dome.
Specialists are so important because they're the ones that can take your team from average to great. The guys that have their specialized roles and understand them and do them really well, those guys are hard to find. And so when you have those guys that are good at what they do and believe in what they're doing, don't care too much about who gets the credit and want to go out and prove something, I think that is probably the most important ingredient in a successful team.
Choose the experts. Choose Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Welcome back, everybody, outside the Fargo Dome as we get set for NDSU in Northern Iowa. It's the time everybody's been waiting for. They're eating Big E, but they want to see on Homecoming 2012, you produced a penguin and picked Youngstown State. What do you do today?
Well, in the theme of homecoming and Dom pumping his tires all week, let's go with the royalty angle here.
How was I pumping my tires?
Hold this in one hand.
I have a scepter. Is that what you give me? You can't ruin the hair.
Nice.
King Dom this week because he's winning the pick'em. That's all we hear about. But this has turned into a grudge match between this program, and you know what grudge match means?
Oh, it's a belt. Does that mean there's a?
Oh! No. That means it's belt time. And you guys remember the XFL?
Yeah, vaguely.
During the coin toss, they'd have 2 guys start in the end zone and try to get to the center field first or midfield to win the coin toss. I suggest you lay this at midfield, Mark Farley in one end zone, Chris Kleiman in the other. Whoever gets the belt first wins the game. Patty Viverito will not let that happen. NDSU 24, Northern Iowa 14.
I have the same exact score. Thank you for the scepter, by the way. In honor of Devin Kleiman getting a pick 6, I think C.J. Smith gets a pick 6 today. First Bison pick 6 since week 3 of last year, the Bison win.
Well, as you know, last week I didn't do so well in my pick.
You did not. You struggled.
I got torched. So I need to bring in some reinforcements. I need to bring in the A-team. Audra Murray, Miss North Dakota, Miss USA runner-up. I just want to know you guys are irrelevant from now on.
Yeah, that's about right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Does she have a prediction?
Do you have a prediction?
Yes, I do. I love Carson Wentz. He's throwing 10 touchdown passes and no interceptions.
Right.
Yep.
No interceptions. And he's so smart at running the Bison offense. It's no wonder he has a 4.0 GPA.
Very good.
What's that? That's craziness.
Yep.
Combine that with NDSU's defense, and I truly believe that Northern Iowa is going down in defeat. Bison 30, Panthers 10.
Wow. Boat race.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Miss North Dakota. Always Miss Dakota to me.
How about that, Kolpak?
Yes.
What do you brings out the super. I still appreciate this.
I go with the royalty angle. He one-ups me. I can't win. I'm not even going to try to compete. Just to see Dom hold this scepter was worth the price of admission for me.
Game starts at 1 o'clock. Our live pregame blog is launching in minutes on Inforum.com, and then we're back after the game for our postgame show. It's NDSU in Northern Iowa inside the Dome. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next week.